we are live. Let's block that out. Give me 15 seconds here. Wake up, sports fans. It's time for the weekend wake up. I am Vito Abenanti. That is Khari Thompson of Boston.com. We have a ton to cram in here, so we're going to get started right away. We're going to talk Cubs offense, historically bad. We're going to talk Sox struggles at the beginning of the season, but we also have some great news on the South Side. We're going to talk some poor umpiring and some possible MLB rule changes. And we will also get to the Blackhawks and Bulls, who are very similar in more ways than we'd like to admit. If you're new to the show, welcome. We are available on Facebook as well as YouTube. Feel free to join the conversation. You can comment. I'll even put those comments up on the screen, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. You can follow the show on Facebook.com/Weekend Wake Up Show. You can also follow the show, and you should go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. It's just my name, Vito Abenanti, and I will post that. Here, you know what? We'll just put that up right now.
Look at that.
So that people can go to the YouTube page and follow the show. We'll put your name up too, Khari, so everyone knows who you are. That's Khari Thompson of Boston.com. I am Vito Abenanti of Nowhere Special. Let's jump right into it. So
I forget where is it exactly that you live now?
I'm in Lombard.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I just the whole journalism thing. Don't want to be spouting false information. You know what I mean? People will be calling me fake news.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking to myself, you know what, Khari? Before you were in journalism, all you would do is spout false information.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. You're right. And then I went legit, and then suddenly everything I said was magically true.
That's right. That's right. It becomes more true.
No falsehoods allowed. Yeah,
it becomes more true as time goes on. Let's jump right in.
Unless you're some members of my family who just think that anybody in media is untrustworthy, unless it's Newsmax. So
yeah, well, don't even get me started on that. That is another show, my friend. We'll have to throw that podcast together at some point. The Cubs offense is historically bad, and I use the terms historically and hysterically because you really just have to laugh. And people will. I say people, and I don't like to use general terms like that. There are a lot of Cubs fans I know, specifically on social media, or people that I've been friends with for a long time, that have continually used the phrase, "It's early." And it drives me nuts because they'll say it in August, or they'll say it after 2 years of horrible offense. Like, it can only be early for so long, and then it's no longer early. And you might say, well, they're only 5-8. It's only 13 games in, and so on. But as of today, following yesterday's loss to the Brewers, the Cubs are hitting 166 as a team, which is bad enough, but it's 37 points behind the second worst team in the league. Going into yesterday's game, the Cubs had a lower team batting average than 4 Major League Baseball team pitching staffs. That's not one pitcher, 2 pitchers. That's an entire pitching staff. The team OPS, which is on base plus slugging combined, is an abysmal 574, which is 60 points behind the second worst team, who in the case of both batting average and OPS, the Cubs are trailing the Brewers. They have the 4th most strikeouts in the league and a staggering 29% strikeout rate. They are striking out in 29% of their plate appearances. And the only thing I can think, like, as I continue along here, Khari, is like infomercial. I just keep thinking, but wait, there's more. They're currently 7 for 83 with runners in scoring position. And I'll just top it all off. I could go on with this all day, but I'll just top it all off with the Cubs have 65 hits in 13 games, which is second worst in the league. However, the team that has 2 fewer hits than them, the Mets, have actually played 4 fewer games. And there are currently 4 teams in the league who have scored more runs than the Cubs have hits. And all this really adds up to essentially is the worst Cub offense through 13 games in approximately 100 years. The league's been around. The Cubs have been around for like 130 years. But this is the worst Cubs offense. And I mean, we're talking 100 years ago when it was called, literally the league was called the dead ball era. It didn't go anywhere. They didn't hit. Nobody hit. So, Khari, you know me. I've been railing against this Cubs offense and this team in general since at least 2018 because of how terrible they've been in my eyes. And in reality, it's not just my eyes. It's the way they've actually played. But this is abysmal. Like, this is brutal. This is supposed to be a professional baseball team. And there's guys on this roster, like big name guys who are expecting contracts at the end of the year. And you've got, Chris Bryant started the season relatively hot, but he's cooled off. He went 0 for 4 yesterday. The only guy who can effectively hit the ball right now is Wilson Contreras. And I know we're 13 games in, but does the organization, have we come to a point where they just punt on the entire roster, trade everyone for whatever they can get? Craig Kimbrell has looked pretty good as a closer. Get what you can for him. Chris Bryant started off hot, like I said, cooled off. Do they just start from scratch like they did in the early 2000s when Theo and Jed first took over and they literally just nuked it and started over?
Well, I mean, I think that, there's a possibility that happens, but I guess this is as a non-Cubs fan. When I look back at how the Cubs have performed cumulatively, I guess, like, I think that there are other teams in the league that would count how the Cubs' performance as a blessing in comparison. I think that when you're sold on this core can win multiple World Series and like their World Series window is like wide open right now, and then you get the one, which is amazing, right? But then you get let down over the next couple of years, right? I think that that maybe drives this narrative that like everything is horrible, like this is the worst and stuff, when in reality the Cubs have not really been all that horrible. They're frustrating, but they're not horrible. Now, what I'll say with that, all that said, I think this rebuild is going to happen because of age, right? When you talk about the World Series window being open, that was back in 2015, right? Or 2016, I guess, if you want to, talk about it in terms of like, okay, yeah, the 2015 year was like, okay, we didn't quite expect to get this far, but in 2016, we expect to win, like this is it, right? And they win and won, but then you expect more from them after that. And they haven't delivered, right? They've been bounced out of the wild card game and the, opening wild card series now, for a couple of years. As I recall, they didn't make the playoffs in 2019. So it's like there's all this kind of disappointment that's built up with this team that was supposed to be great. And I think that the vibes the Ricketts have been giving us is that, yeah, it's probably about time to go in a different direction, right? And we've talked about it. Chris Bryant is probably gone. I don't think he wants to be here because the Cubs organization has made him mad from the moment he joined the big club, right? And then you have guys that and Anthony Rizzo's getting up there in age. Wilson Contreras and Javi Baez are good, but I think that in recent years they haven't been that kind of superstar level that it looked like they were going to be. They've been good, right? But are they NL MVPs or anything like that. Like, not really. So I think that, this is probably about that time where by this trade deadline, yeah, I think there's going to be some movement with this team. Or it's planning, if they're going to do what it looks like they're planning to do, then there should be movement on this team. This should be a seller, in my opinion.
I think my biggest problem, look, I agree with a lot of what you said, Khari, but my biggest problem with what you said was, this team actually hasn't been that bad. What I think has happened is they've won some games. They won substantial amounts of games, over 90 wins in 5 straight seasons or 4 straight seasons. And
at 84 wins, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think the biggest problem with that is, look, winning cures all. That's the old phrase, right? Winning cures all. But if you look at the way the team was built, yes, they were winning games, but they were extremely flawed. And a lot of these guys went through really bad. I mean, look, baseball players are streaky to begin with, but a lot of these guys went through some tough stretches. And you kind of look at it, it's one of those like Dennis Green, they are who we thought they are kind of things.
Sure.
Where you see Javi Baez swing at, I've never seen a guy, it's confusing to me because he swings at pitches, obviously, that are way out of the zone, but he swings through more fastballs in the zone than a lot of guys I've seen. And that's problematic for a Major League Baseball player. A fastball in the zone should be your bread and butter. You should always be looking fastball and working down, but I've seen him swing through more fastballs in the zone than anybody, I think, in the history of baseball. It's incredible. And
you didn't see Yoan Moncada in his first year as a starter with the Red Sox.
True.
but I think that with him in particular, right? And we've talked about this a number of times, right? Like, I know how frustrated you are with Baez, and definitely there's a bit of a feast or famine element there. For all of that, just wild waving and stuff like that. Honestly, even you were talking about, I've never seen somebody like kind of swing at pitches out of the zone the way that he does. It's like, it reminds me of Vlad Guerrero. Like, my dad and I would always just laugh at Vlad Guerrero swinging at anything and everything. I think I saw him golf a home run out of the park. Like, this ball was literally about to hit the dirt, and he scoops it out of the ballpark.
He hit a homer on a ball that bounced.
Yeah. At the same time, it's like, Vlad Guerrero didn't really miss fastballs in the zone. That wasn't really his thing.
Exactly.
When it comes to like with Baez, right? It's feast or famine. At the same time, his track record for the most part suggests that he's a 260-ish hitter, 260, 270 hitter. Like, that's his career batting average. He obviously, he was rough in his first year. But then after that, he was pretty consistent. He was rough last year. A lot of people were, though. And it's like on my side of town, right? So I'm watching the Boston Red Sox. Javier Baez is not nearly as good of a hitter as JD Martinez is, but JD Martinez is back. You know what I mean? In 2020, back to being what he is. I still would say to an extent this is early, right? But at the same time, this isn't new, right?
Sure.
Like, what we're seeing from him is not necessarily new. I think that, it's going to be an interesting question to see what somebody like a Baez could get on the market, because I feel like he's a very, he's arguably the most talented player on the team right now, though I'd probably still say Chris Bryant is when he's healthy. But he's still immensely talented, aside from throwing that ball almost completely off the field the other day. He's a pretty good defensive player, and he gives you power, and when he gets hot, he gives you just generally good hitting. But it really makes me wonder who, if anybody, is actually safe here. They're going to keep somebody.
Well, here's my thing. Here's my thing. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to get to that in just a second. So Brian joins us on Facebook. And by the way, if you'd like to join us on Facebook, feel free to join the conversation. Brian's basically saying the Cubs have been gaslighting us for 4 years. He says that, and you brought up what Javi might get. He says Javi's not going to get more than $80 million. And I mean, I'm going to disagree with Brian because I think that, look, historically, if you look at Major League Baseball, even mediocre players get paid. A lot of times, it's really weird because you'll see guys where you're like, I can't believe he got that much money, and then you'll see other guys where you're like, I can't believe he only got that much money. So I think Major League Baseball is all over the map, particularly because there is no salary cap. So there's nothing really restricting these guys from either getting ridiculous deals or kind of making the market what it is. But my problem with Baez is, look, 2018, great. He hit, 290. He had 34 homers, 111. But I mean, he's, for the most part, he's hit 23, 29. He had a rough, well, he was in and out a little in 2016 when they won, but not, he's got 14 homers here. But the stats that he puts up, you can kind of get from a lot of guys. This isn't particularly like, well, we watch him swing from his heels. In this league, Kyrie, in this league right now, with home runs the way they are, 25 home runs is nothing. It means nothing. If you're hitting, I understand hitting 290. I love using batting average because people don't use it as much anymore. They go with on base and they go with OPS total, and that's fine. But you're still talking about a guy who had a 326 on base percentage with a 290 batting average. How is your on base percentage only 36 points higher than your batting average? It just means you don't understand how to get on base in the game of baseball. People are going to talk about swinging. He swings from his heels, and it drives me nuts. He swings out of his shoes. What does that give you? Now, if it were Vlad Guerrero, you brought up Vlad Guerrero. If it were Vlad Guerrero and he were swinging like that, which he did, he swung at everything, he was still hitting the ball out 450 feet, and he was doing it 40 times a year. Javi Baez is not doing that. So what are you getting for this free swinging, like all of the, if he were hitting 40 or 45 home runs a year, you wouldn't hear me say a thing. But you're not getting anything for being free swinging. All you're doing is striking out more, and you're hitting the same amount of home runs as guys like Kyle Schwarber. And I mean, I could name off 15 guys. I could look at a list of 15 guys who could hit 15 or more or 25 or more home runs on any given year. So what does Baez give you? To Brian's point, he actually said on here, Javi's not going to get more than 80 million. I think he's going to get more than that, but he's probably not wrong in the sense of he's not worth $200 million.
Well, no, of course not. He's not going to get like Manny Machado money or something like that. You know what I mean? I think that another factor involved in this is COVID, right? So how much are teams going to be willing to spend? You got a lot of, these last couple of off seasons have been very slow. And I think that, it's perfectly reasonable to think that they're not, like, he's not going to fetch, what he might have fetched a couple of years ago. Sure. Right. If he was coming off of his all-star seasons and stuff like that. Second
in MVP voting and so on.
Yeah. A lot of it is going to depend on how he rebounds from this part of the season. I think that for the most part, right, the whole, the 25 home runs thing, like, yeah, sure. Like you have players like Hunter Renfroe that are hitting 20 plus home runs or almost 30 home runs or whatever. At the same time, we're seeing right now just how that trend is starting to change, right? We've got people talking about moving the mound back and like, how dominant pitchers are and how batting averages are so low because the league is starting to figure this stuff out with launch angles and people just kind of like anybody just hitting a bunch of home runs. So I think that, that might change, though that also might change for Baez. Like he might not be hitting 20 home runs, right? So I think it's going to be about adjustments with him. I can, agree with Brian's point that, Story and Seager and Correa are, going to potentially get paid a lot more, but that doesn't mean that, he's trash. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean he's not going to get paid anything. Like I just think he's still a top,
he's slightly above average. I'm not saying he's trash. I just think he's slightly above average. And these guys, not just Baez, but like Bryant, all these guys have been talking for years. They haven't specifically been talking, but their agents and everyone's talking about how these guys need to get paid. None of these guys deserve this money. They're all 250 hitters, 260 hitters. They're all going to hit 25 home runs. Great. I mean, there were, let's see. I can't even get the numbers to show up. I mean, there's guys hitting 50, 45 home runs consistently. And it's just like, what are you doing? What are you paying for 25 home runs for? Look, you can talk about analytics and Moneyball and all the rest of this, and you're looking at things like launch angle, and you want guys that get on base and runs scored. Like it's all Pythagorean win-loss is based on runs scored versus runs allowed. That's what it is. That's how you win games. You score runs, and that's how you win games. But if you're scoring the same amount of runs, hitting 25, when everybody on the team hits 25 home runs, but they all hit 230. Personally, the old school guy in me wants to think to myself, if you could hit 260, 270, 280, and you're getting on base at a 350 or 360 clip instead of 326, how many more runs are you going to score instead of swinging for the fences? I get it. One swing means one run. But you know what? 3 swings means a strikeout, and you did nothing. You did exactly nothing. So I don't know. I can't. To Brian's point, Brian, who's watching the show, Anthony's currently watching the show on Facebook. You guys can watch the show as well and join the conversation. To Brian's point, like, he doesn't want to watch them because they're virtually unwatchable at this point. And it's like, what are these guys expecting? Everyone's swinging for the fences. Even David Ross, and there was an article in The Athletic written by Patrick Mooney and Sahadev Sharma about how bad the Cubs offense has been. And David Ross, the manager, well, we have to have better at bats. We can't be looking for home runs. That's how this offense has been built for 6 years. Why are they going to change now? It's mostly the same guys. I don't see it. I don't see it. And
I think that I understand the frustration. I think that, right, it's like we talked about the fact that this team was probably going to be bad, but when they are bad, right, it's still frustrating because you're hoping that they're going to outperform expectations. Like, again, out here in Boston, the rap on the Red Sox was that they were going to be 4th in the division, right, most likely 4th or 5th in the AL East. And then they rip off a 9-game winning streak after a pretty rough first series where everybody's like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. And then they go on a 9-game win streak. And now it's like, oh, well, I guess they're not actually as bad as we thought they were going to be. Right. So it's like, that's what I think people are hoping for. But, I think that, again, the Cubs have, I think, shown you who they are for a while. They've shown that that they were capable when everything, when they had the pitching staff around, when they had the role players around, that they could win a World Series. And they did, right? And they showed you they could make the playoffs and that they could win a lot of games. But again, I think the bottom line is, there's a limit. And I think they've reached their limit. They've ridden with this core as long as it goes. And now it's time to let it go, right? It's 6 years into most of this, and again, you kind of seen how far they can take you and just where they are right now. And yeah, I think I think it's time.
Anthony jumped in and said, I think Javi feeds off other guys big time. If the rest were doing better, he would. But the truth is they all suck, so Javi sucks too. But last year it was I couldn't watch video during the games, and this year it's we're all terrible, so I'm just going to be terrible too. Brian jokes that the Starlin Castro reunion show is coming to Clark and Addison next year. No more Javi. Starlin Castro is coming back. What is he, like 40 now, Brian? If you're just joining the show, this is the Weekend Wake Up. I'm Vito. That's Khari. We're talking Cubs baseball right now. We also have the White Sox to get to, some Major League Baseball general stuff, and Blackhawks and Bulls. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can do so on Facebook as well as YouTube. Khari, I brought up the idea that the Cubs, might be making a lot of moves. You've got a lot of guys under contract just for this year. You've got some of them struggling, but some of them are playing pretty well. And we talked about it. This team just isn't the team that it's supposedly built to be. It's not a World Series contender. Again, they made the playoffs a bunch of years in a row. It was like watching the 90s Braves, and that team was better. The Braves were built better. They made it to multiple World Series. They just couldn't win any of them. But if the Cubs decide to nuke it and start over, who stays and who goes? Like, who do they build around for the future? And who do they just say, you know what, we can get more by not paying this guy $300 million and we can actually get more for our future for him?
So in kind of thinking about that, I went and dug into a little bit of some projections to see. So on Fangraphs, I've been getting more into Zip's projections with Dan Zimborski. He kind of does these kind of futuristic sorts of things where you think players are going to be at in a couple of years down the road. And interestingly enough, the most valuable player in terms of WAR is Javier Baez. Of all the core, everybody who's supposed to still be on, in theory on this team is actually Javi Baez, followed by Chris Bryant. Well, Chris Bryant's not going to be here. I think that none of us are expecting that at this point. And then Wilson Contreras and actually Anthony Rizzo, because I think Anthony Rizzo is the oldest of the bunch, that the projections are that he's going to start falling off. So I have said that I think it would not surprise me if Javi Baez remained with the Cubs, because I think that even if he is frustrating, especially at the plate, for the most part, he's still a fairly valuable player. When he makes contact, he hits the ball hard. He's again, a good defender, a good base runner, kind of all of these like kind of total package sorts of things. I think that, Anthony Rizzo could probably help a team someplace else. Honestly, I think that he would make sense in the American League, where he could play first base, he could DH. Chris Bryant. I mean, Chris Bryant. People are going to pay for Chris Bryant. I think that as much as he has kind of fallen off a bit over the past couple of years, I think that what he's shown to be at his peak, and he's still at a young enough age where I think somebody's going to think like, yeah, we can get something out of this guy. Wilson Contreras might stay. I think that I wouldn't be surprised to see him be shopped, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see him stay, because again, assuming Brian is gone, he would be the next most valuable guy on this list. Obviously, catchers that can hit are fairly at a premium, like hit like he can. You know what I mean? So I think that that's valuable to a team as well. So if you made me pick, I would say the two people most likely to be here of that bunch are probably going to be Javi Baez and Wilson Contreras. Again, that is who knows what's going to happen. None of them might be here for all we know, though. Someone's going to still be here of like that four of Baez, Contreras, Bryant, and Rizzo. One of them's still going to be here at least. But I think, interestingly enough, in terms of what the projections seem to think, like who would be most worth keeping, that seems to be who it suggests. Go figure.
I'm inclined to agree with you for a couple reasons. One, despite my disdain for the way Javi Baez approaches things at the plate, he's serviceable at the plate. He's a relatively good fielder. He does launch some balls every once in a while. I think he gets saved a lot by Rizzo over at first as well on balls that are more in the dirt than anything. He spikes some balls over there that are confusing when he's got time to wind up and all that. But either way, I'm still of the old school mentality of you build up the middle. And to your point, if you have a starting caliber major league shortstop, you don't get rid of him unless you're getting some sort of exponentially ridiculous haul. If you have a starting caliber major league catcher, you don't get rid of him unless you're getting something or you have someone behind him. And the Cubs don't have anybody behind these guys. Look, Ed Howard, I see people talking about Ed Howard. Well, Ed Howard's 3 years away. So Javi Baez is 28 years old. Fine. When Javi Baez is in his early 30s, if you're signing him to a 5-year deal or something along those lines, that means he's got a year or two left when Ed Howard supposedly makes it. But if you talk about, guys that should be here, those are probably the two that I would say. Look, I would love for Rizzo to stick around. I really would. And he took a bit of a discount of his own will. He took a bit of a discount with his last deal. But you're talking about a guy who's in his early 30s now with back problems. And I get rid of 2020 just because 2020 was a garbage season for everyone. It was confusing for everyone. That was really his only off year. He's been the model of consistency for the Cubs. He's not playing very well right now, but he's been the model of consistency for the Cubs. Would I love to see him end his career in a Cubs uniform? Sure, I would. Would I love to see it at $150 million or even $120 million? Probably not. That's just, I don't see it as far as what this team needs to move forward, spending money on a guy with back problems in his early 30s. I just don't really see it. But yeah, to your point, KB, you can probably get the most for him. So see ya. Yeah. I mean, if that's what it takes, you're not going to pay him $250 million. You're not going to pay him that money. So get what you can for him.
Yeah, they've all but said they're not doing that. So I think at this point it is get whatever prospects you can or first round picks or whatever you can do for him. You do that. And you make sure that you get at least one blue chip level prospect back because I think Chris Bryant deserves that. Both for what he has done in the past as well as what he's still capable of, right? In my opinion, like is he necessarily going to be the NL MVP again? Maybe not, but you better get a top level prospect for him. And if that's not going to happen, then that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think the key to the Chris Bryant trade is you need either a high one, like very high level prospect, or two pretty high level prospects. Yeah. And one of them has to be a pitcher. One of them has to be a starting pitcher. The Cubs I don't understand how they're so terrible at finding pitchers and developing them themselves, but they can't continue to go out and pay free agents, or trade for trade for guys who are going to be free agents and then have to pay them on the back end because it's not conducive to continuing to build a winning team. The whole Darvish thing, that was great. When they were starting out and they had to spend all that money on John Lester, that was a good investment. When you're trying to rebuild, though, again, like that was the key. They knew they had all these young players coming up behind John Lester. And that was the key to get other free agents to come here or to let people know that they were going to be a legitimate team. Signing John Lester was a big thing, but they didn't they had to make trades to bring guys in. They had to sign other guys after the fact, meaning Darvish. And you just can't build a team like that spending $600 million on a pitching staff.
Yeah, not for a rebuilding team, right?
Right.
So I think right with when it came to the Cubs, in 15, right, in 14 and 15, they had the pieces in place already for what they saw would be a playoff roster eventually within that year, and it ended up being that year, right? Or the following year. And I think with the White Sox, right, is kind of a similar deal, right? So they knew that Luis Robert was probably going to start in center field next year and he was going to come up. That Moncada had shown that he could be a star, right? And then they, re-signed Abreu and kept him around for a little bit. And then what they do, they went out and they signed Dallas Keuchel. And then this year they brought in Lance Lynn, because when you have, especially when you have the lineup set and you don't have to bring in a bunch of outside tools for your everyday lineup, well, then you can fill in a little bit with the pitchers. You can go splurge on one or two free agent pitchers, as long as you've also got one or two other guys that you can trust to go out there and take the ball, every fifth day. Right. So, the Dallas Keuchel thing and the Lance Lynn thing works because you have Lucas Giolito. Right. And because you have the rest of the lineup basically filled in with your guys.
Correct.
So
you can't sign your top three pitchers. Like, that's just not a thing. You have to either develop or trade for guys that are either, bookending your 1 and 3, or your 2 and 4. Like but you can't spend all the money on your top three pitchers and expect to be a viable franchise. And
even the Yankees can't sign their whole everyday lineup.
Right.
You can go out and you can go ahead and trade for Giancarlo Stanton, or you can pay, like they did back in the day. Like you could pay big, or trade to take on the contract of an Alex Rodriguez or something like that, or shell out a bunch of money in free agency. But you can't do that for everyone. You do that for one or two guys.
Right.
And so I think that, first of all, the Cubs seem to be signaling they're not doing that, period. Anyway, it looks like they are fully planning to go bargain hunting.
Yeah, when you trade away Yu Darvish, I mean, you already paid him the money. When you trade away Yu Darvish, you pretty much, for Zach Davies and a bunch of lottery tickets and just hope for the best. You pretty much you've showed your hand in that case. Yeah. If you're joining the show on Facebook Live or YouTube, thanks for doing so. You can join the conversation on both. So if you're on YouTube Live, go ahead and add some comments. If you are on Facebook, you can join Brian and Anthony in adding their comments. Follow the show and subscribe on YouTube by just looking for my name, Vito Abinanti, and subscribe to the show page. You can also join the show on Facebook by going to facebook.com/Weekend Wake Up Show. Let's move on to the White Sox. You just mentioned the White Sox, and I wanted to bring them up as well. They're kind of middle of the road in most offensive categories, so not historically bad like the Cubs. And they're slightly better than middle of the road in a few pitching categories, which basically puts them at the 6 and 7 they are at right now. Now, currently, the expected stars like Abreu and Moncada aren't really lighting the world on fire. They're hitting in the 100s. And Tim Anderson was on the injured list until 2 days ago. But there have been guys, brighter side guys like Yermin Mercedes, still swinging a hot stick, batting in the upper 400s. And the pitching staff, the starters in particular, outside of Dallas Keuchel, have been mostly solid, which brings me to something that happened this week, and a guy, Carlos Rodon. So here's a guy who's basically on a 1-year prove-it deal because of mediocrity and injuries over his past 4 or 5 years with the White Sox. He comes out, now he had a 0 ERA, he pitched 5 scoreless innings in his first start, comes out on Wednesday and throws a no-hitter in an 8-0 win. He was basically 2 outs from a perfect game against Cleveland, but he hit Roberto Perez in the foot with a slider. And, Sox fans went crazy saying he didn't get out of the way and, all this goofy stuff. But either way, throws a no-no. It's been a mediocre start to the season for the team, but guys like Mercedes and obviously Rodon can be useful pieces on the roster. If they continue this run, obviously the Sox were hoping a guy like Rodon would be some sort of revelation like they've expected him to be for the last 3-4 years. How quickly can the Sox turn this 6 and 7 into 17 and 10 or, and turning their season around and go on a little run here early in the season, get out ahead of things?
I think that it really comes down to the lineup. It comes down to like Jose Abreu and Yohan Moncada to me, because Abreu's had slow starts in the past. It happens. With him, and then he gets hot. And when he gets hot, he is scorching. That tends to be his MO a lot of the time, is when he's on, it's ridiculous. Moncada, I think, is a bit of a tougher case because he had one superstar level year sandwiched around some tough years, right? And last year he had COVID, so he wasn't entirely himself. I think that as long as the starting pitching stays good, stays solid the way that it has, you need Dallas Keuchel to be better. But Lucas Giolito's been good. Lance Lynn has been good. Rodon obviously has been just strangely dominant. The bullpen has been a problem. That's one thing that I think has been an issue. And I talked about the bullpen being, in my opinion, too talented to be bad, right? Aaron Bummer has been unfortunately lost, which is a bummer because normally he's pretty good.
That's a dad joke right there.
Definitely, I was weighing whether or not I wanted to do it, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you did. I'm really glad you did.
It's right there. Garrett Crochet has picked up some unfortunate, no decisions and losses out of the bullpen because of the starting a runner on second base rule. I think that the other thing that's been frustrating with the White Sox is I understand you don't have Eloy Jimenez and that Tim Anderson was hurt for a little while, but for God's sake, stop playing Nick Williams and stop playing Jake Lamb. And honestly, even though Billy Hamilton, when he's been healthy, even though Billy Hamilton has actually been okay, stop playing Billy Hamilton so much. Andrew Vaughn is on the club for a reason. Okay, they put him on the roster instead of doing the whole service time manipulation so that he could play, so that his bat could play, and he hasn't been bad in left field. Play the man. Okay, it make like that right there. This is why people didn't want Tony La Russa to be the manager. There was the we don't want him to cramp the youngin style and be like a crotchety old man level thing, right? Like, so obviously that was part of it, but the other part is, can you manage baseball like today, right? In modern baseball, right? The front office told you with Andrew Vaughn being on this club that he's supposed to play, right? And yeah, he hasn't necessarily lit the world on fire when he's been in the lineup, but he is clearly the best bat of the ones that you could be putting in the lineup at that position. And you have this guy basically go, I trust the older guys and I want to develop them too. And it's like, no, this is not about development. No development. This is about winning. Okay. This team is supposed to be a playoff, championship contender. No development.
You know what?
For Nick Williams and all that. Andrew Vaughn is the best option right now. Eloy was supposed to be the best option, and Vaughn was going to, maybe you would have kept him down in that event. Maybe he wouldn't have started with the big club. Maybe he would have been a platoon player, what have you. That we could have understood if Eloy was here, but he's not. That means stop messing around. Okay? He's the best option. Play him.
Do you think he needs to develop Billy Hamilton a little more? There's a guy who needs some developing.
And again, I'll say Billy Hamilton, when they put him in the games, again, he's not hitting for power or anything like that. He's never that guy, but he has hit. He's gotten on base. He's stolen bases. He has been more useful so far than he's probably been in years. I will say that. And when Billy Hamilton gets on base, it's a cheat code because you can't throw him out. But again, bats, you need runs created. Andrew Vaughn can help you create runs. Billy Hamilton has also helped you create runs, but Andrew Vaughn's bat helps you create runs. Nick Williams does nothing for you. Jake Lamb does nothing for you. Stop playing around with this. And again, I think that the injuries have forced lineup shuffles. I get that part, but no, this is what's frustrating White Sox fans. This is exactly why somebody else besides Tony La Russa would have been a better fit for this team, because they would have figured anybody like AJ Hinch would have been a better choice. We all said it. We all said it at the time. We all knew it. The Tigers got the better manager.
Yeah.
It's just immensely frustrating because some of it is injury. Some of it's just like, the players need to hit better. The players need to throw the ball better. Tony La Russa is not out there swinging the bat or throwing the ball, but give your team the best opportunity to win. And I don't think he's done it.
You mentioned the bullpen real quick. So Liam Hendriks hasn't been outstanding. He's only had 4 appearances, but he's got a 6.23 ERA.
Yeah, he served up a game tying homer the other day, blew a save.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were expecting. Look again early. If you want to say something about a Chicago team and say it's early, and actually mean there's a lot more season left, and you should be optimistic, it can be about the Sox. It can't be about the Cubs. It can be about the Sox. The one thing, and we talked about this when he first made his first appearance this year, the one thing that they're going to have to rely on in their bullpen is going to be Michael Kopech. And he's been great so far. I mean, he's given up one earned run in 4 appearances. So in 7 2/3 innings. I mean, he's been great for them, but they're going to rely on him a lot more than people think, coming off of a year off and Tommy John, like all of these things, the injuries and all the rest of this stuff. They're basically just going to bring him back up to speed. I really feel like pretty quickly. You're going to be a pretty important part of this bullpen if you're a Michael Kopech. Am I way out of left field there?
Well, I think that beyond that, right, Dylan Cease is on the injured list right now. He hasn't been particular. I mean, he's been all right, but he's been wild, right?
Which is a Dylan Cease. I mean, that's what Dylan Cease was known for.
He's been wild, and he also, again, for the stuff that he has, he's just not missing bats. Like it's just strange, right? So more than just him being an important member of the bullpen, there is a non-zero chance that by the end of this, you're going to see Michael Kopech starting again.
Yeah.
And again, they'll try to bring him on relatively slowly, right? I mean, yeah, Tommy John, back in 2019, missed all of last year. So
do you think he's got a little bit before June?
Before June?
I mean, that's only a month and a half. Do you think he's a starter before June? Injuries aside, I mean, look, it's probably going to take the perfect storm of either someone's got to play horribly, someone's got to pitch horribly, or they have to be injured for an extended period of time. But you're not seeing it.
I don't think so, because I think that perhaps, and this could be wrong, but I think perhaps the first thing that you might see is, Ronaldo Lopez is still, he's with the alternate, club over in Schaumburg. I could see him getting, some more starts and just kind of eating a couple of innings rather than throwing Kopech right back into the mix right away. If Dylan Cease is injured or if he's just bad, right? So you have options of guys that can, go in on the 5th day, you use an opener or whatever, you eat up a couple of innings and then you expect a long relief situation, or maybe on a 6th day, if you want to give somebody a little bit of extra rest. I think that that's probably what happens first, but I think that Michael Kopech's going to start a game at some point this year, at least one. And ultimately that's what he's destined for, though. To me, he's supposed to be a starting pitcher. He's not supposed to be a bullpen arm. He's only a bullpen arm because he got hurt, right? So I think that they're going to be very wary. At least I feel they're going to be wary of putting him right back in that 5th starter role right now, especially when, as good as Rodon has been, if he can stay healthy, right? Because that's the other thing. If Rodon can't stay healthy, then you're almost going to have to do it, right? But if he can stay healthy and you've got your top 4 starters set, good to go, then you have options that you can play around with in the 5th spot. That's not going to require Kopech to do that. But I think that if he continues pitching as well as he's pitched, it's just going to happen at some point.
If you're just joining the show, this is the Weekend Wake Up. I'm Vito. That is Khari from Boston.com. You can join the show. You can join the conversation on both Facebook and YouTube Live. In fact, go over to YouTube Live. Go over to the YouTube website and search for my name, Vito Abenanti, and you will find our Weekend Wake Up page. You can subscribe right there. You sort of in passing mentioned you were kind of talking about the starters, and I think you used, what was the term? What was the term that you used for? I'm trying to think of a opener. The opener. Okay.
Yeah.
So the opener drives me nuts, but I'm glad you brought this up because we're gonna get to two like general Major League Baseball stories right here, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Major League Baseball is testing some rule changes in the Atlantic League, which is an independent league. So two of the changes they're testing is moving the mound back 1 foot. So currently 60 feet 6 inches. They're going to move it back a foot. And the idea is to force more contact and fewer strikeouts. But the second thing that they're talking about is something called the hybrid DH. And the reason this pertains to your opener idea is because the DH essentially in this plan goes away when the starter is removed. So what happens is it either forces you to go away from openers if you want to keep that bat in your lineup, or it just essentially forces managers to keep their starters in longer, which I don't mind because pulling guys in the fourth and fifth, and I mean, when you know they can go longer, they run at the first sign of trouble, they're out of the game. But it also does some things that, you know, baseball purists want to see, and it keeps the double switch and these hitting matchups and pitching matchups later in the game, because now you actually do have to worry about, well, I'm going through this inning, my relief pitcher's batting two guys from now, and I've got two guys on with only one out. Do I want to pull him, even though he's pitching pretty well, or do I, you know, just see where it goes, and maybe we can get these 2 runs in before this, and I just let my pitcher hit, so on. So are either of these ideas must-haves for you, Khari, moving forward in Major League Baseball?
I mean, for myself, I guess I don't get as angry about the kind of true outcomes, right? The you know, strikeouts and home runs and stuff like that. I'm just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of the evolution of the game, in the same way that in the NBA, people take more threes now, you know, because analytically, right, 3 points is worth more than 2 points, as opposed to, man, I remember during the pandemic, like in the early days of the pandemic, when there was no basketball, just random notes. I was watching old school like NBA, and I swear it didn't matter where dudes were taking 2-point jump shots from. Foot inside the arc, you know, just borderline on the baseline, you know, like right by the 3-point line, or like whatever. If it was a 2-pointer, it was a better shot than chucking a 3. You know what I mean? It's like, just shoot your shot. That just is what it is. And I feel like that kind of mentality of the doesn't matter how it's like, doesn't matter how you get on base, single, double, doesn't matter what kind of contact you make, contact is good contact. I think like that kind of old school mentality is what baseball in a way is trying to get back to, in almost this subtle kind of war against analytics. I almost sense a little bit where it's like, okay, yeah, well, baseball wants to see more home runs and launch angles and stuff like that. Well, pitchers are already adjusting to that by pitching more up in the zone, so that you can't just so you can't just you know, sit on something and try to pop it up and get it in the air. But again, I think that, you know, this kind of regression, you know, it's like we want to get things back to the way that, you know, it used to be, and, you know, bring back the stolen base and the bunt and all of that is, you know, that's kind of what I see in it. I do like contact. I also like home runs. You know, I like you know, I like to see stolen bases. I also like strikeouts. It's fun watching somebody just mow down an entire lineup sometimes when their stuff's really on. I just kind of take it for what it is. So for me, I don't know that I need to see the mound moved back. I just, you just need to see adjustments from hitters. And again, right, if pitchers continue dominating and crushing teams, and teams aren't scoring runs the way that they used to because they're getting out, well, then you're going to have to adjust one way or another. The game is going to take care of itself as far as I see it. And you're going to start seeing more contact hitters. As far as the hybrid DH, just to do that one really quickly. Again, I don't know that I need to see openers go away entirely, though I personally think that I would be fine with that if it were uniformly enforced. Right. If you're talking about putting the DH back in the National League and that rule applies to everybody, I'm all right with that.
Well, and I think that's the idea. I think it's, look, if we're going to bring the DH to both leagues, maybe we switch to a hybrid. It's still certifiably insane to me that within the same league, you can have two completely different sets of rules. Like that's just crazy to me. I know it's been like that for so long. When was the DH incorporated? 60s, 70s?
Yeah, I think it was 70s.
So I mean,
think it might have been. I cannot remember this entire. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was like 77 or something like that.
So you're talking, almost 40 years. You're talking of this rule where one half of the league plays things one way and the other half plays things the other way, and these teams play each other. It's not like they're completely separate from each other for the entire year, and then when we get to the World Series, now that's when these, it's like a brother versus brother clash and all this other stuff.
And
they play each other.
Yeah. And I think there's this whole idea of interleague, right? This is going to be fun because now pitchers will have to hit when they go to National League parks. I don't care about pitchers hitting. And it's like, I literally I can't understand for the life of me why anybody badly wants to see pitchers keep hitting. It's like, it forces you to be more strategic. Get that out of here,
if man. You want your pitcher to hit,
strategy.
If you want your pitcher to hit, then he's your DH. Yeah, he's your DH. There you go. It's that simple.
You want to see, Jake Arrieta or Madison Bumgarner or whoever it is, keep him in your lineup that day.
If he's a better hitter than anybody else on your bench, then go for it. Put him in the lineup. Who cares?
Yeah.
Travis Wood a couple years ago, he was that guy, Carlos Zambrano for the Cubs, these guys could hit. They were going to hit, 210 or something, or even in the low, they were going to hit in the low 200s. They were going to hit a few homers. That was fun. Okay. I mean, if they're a better hitter than someone else in your lineup, then go for it. But it's just, it's ridiculous, especially in a league where you have specialists for everything. You have pinch hitters, guys that come off the bench specifically to be pinch hitters. You have, long relievers, you have setup men, you have closers. These guys are all specialists. How can you not have a guy on your bench that is just a hitter? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and the other thing is they're talking about enforcing some of these rules, or some of these rule changes because they want to improve the product, because people are mad about too many strikeouts, not enough contact, blah blah blah. We want to see more action. It's like, you want to know what doesn't give you action? Watching pitchers bunt or strike out. Those are basically the two outcomes you're going to see most of the time early in a game with pitchers, or they're just going to generally be out. Oh my goodness, they grounded out to the shortstop. Who cares? You want to improve the product of the game? Take pitchers out of the damn lineup because they can't hit.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know who does need to get better at bunting though? Everybody else in the lineup, because you can't tell me that it's not sometimes a useful part of the game of baseball.
Yeah,
it's also ridiculous that the league got rid of DH in the National League after having it last year, because it's just none of it makes any sense.
It's back to a normal year now. So let's have let's
go back to the normal stupidity that we had before. That's all I think of. I do like the idea of the hybrid DH. The regular DH doesn't bother me, but I am also a double switch, kind of put some like mental thought back into the game for managers. I would love to see the hybrid DH. As far as moving the mound back, to your point, if you want less strikeouts, hit better. Like I don't, I teach these guys to hit better, make contact instead of worrying about launch angle, because launch angle means 0. It means less than 0 if you don't make contact with the ball. There is a 0 launch angle if you don't make contact with the ball. So along the same lines of, I enjoy analytics. I do. But there are fundamental things that you should be doing in the game of baseball that don't rely on analytics to know that you're doing well or you're doing poorly. So I never understood this mentality of you have to go one way or the other. You have to go with analytics. Look, we're going with OPS and that's it. We're going with launch angle and that's it. It doesn't make any sense. And saying, well, a strikeout's just a strikeout. You're right, but it's an opportunity wasted. Is in my mind, that's what a strikeout is. You didn't even touch the ball. You didn't give the players in the field a chance to make an error. You didn't give yourself a chance to get on base because you swung through or you watched, strike 3. You didn't take a walk. There are so many things that you didn't do in order to get that strikeout. And that's what drives me crazy when people say like, well, that's a true outcome. It is a true outcome. You did nothing. You got nowhere.
And I think with that, right, I can understand to an extent, especially with power hitters, right? Just get the ball in the air, because I feel like analytically they're more valuable. They're like, some of these guys are just more valuable hitting the ball out of the park, or, again, like doubling, right, than just getting a single and being on first base, because then they're just going to slow everything up. So I think that there's that part of it, right? But if you're talking about like your number 8, number 9 hitter, like, oh yeah, just get the ball in the air. Why? So you can fly out to right field or something. Now there are examples, right, of players that, that kind of just get the ball in the air sort of mentality, turn them into stars, like a Mookie Betts, right? Sure. But again, not everybody's Mookie Betts. So I think that they're, in a way, right, as with so many sports, analytics, I think has its place, and I love the use of them. I love looking at advanced statistics. I love looking at these deeper aspects of the game, and I love the fact that people are trying to find any little edge that they can. At the same time, I think that just traditional baseball has its place, just like it does in any other sport, right? Like in the NBA, for example, I still love seeing people shoot mid-range jumpers. If that's your shot,
sure,
then shoot a mid-range jumper if that's what you're good at, right? Like, you don't need to only shoot threes and layups. Like that doesn't have to be that way. And I don't like when teams, as to your point, decide that we are going fully analytics and that is it. We are going by the numbers. We got the book open right now and we read from this book and that's how it is.
It doesn't have to be either or.
In the same way that I don't like when people are purely just based off of, well, if I'm bringing in a relief pitcher, to face a lefty, then he has to be a lefty. Right. As opposed to my best reliever is a right-hander and he's solid against lefties, so just let the man go.
Right.
As opposed to like doing this whole like, well, this is just how I feel about it, because this is how it's always been done.
I don't care if he throws
a Tony La Russa special.
If he could legally throw with his left foot and get people out, I don't care. Like, put him in. His job is to get people out. I don't care if it's only lefties or only righties. Now, look, if he can only get lefties out, sure, bring him in when you're only facing lefties. But it's like the whole, and again, we go back to they're specialists for everything. And that's fine if they're specialists, but you can't just use that rule of, well, everybody has to be a specialist and make it all encompassing. It just doesn't work that way. I want to stick with Major League Baseball for one more quick second. We won't spend too much time on this, but there's been some questionable umpiring lately, and I'm gonna put a picture up here that everyone can see. Let's see. We're gonna show this. And I don't know if everybody can see this, but okay, so you can see this chart here, right?
I saw that.
This is from StatCast, and in case you really, let me see if I can make it a little. No, I just moved it around. Yeah, so I can make it a little bigger if I close us off here, and that's fine. Nobody needs to see us anyway. But so you can see here, this was a 9-pitch at bat, and the person who was at the plate was Xander Bogaerts. He took pitch number 9, as you can see over here on the right hand side. He took pitch number 9 for called strike 3. Now, if you're looking at that pitch, and the way this is set up, that pitch is so far outside that if you are an umpire, I'm not sure how you can justify calling that strike 3. Now, there's some ticky-tack calls right on the border. Maybe it's a little outside. Maybe he's been calling it all day. That pitch was actually more than a ball width wide. It's not like a seam was touching the black on the plate. I mean, it's a full ball width and then some. I'm talking 3 to 4 inches outside of the plate.
And I was watching that strikeout in real time. That ball was thrown by a left-handed pitcher. So
right. You
don't even have a scenario in which it was coming from a righty and maybe it caught a piece of the plate or something as it slid by. That wasn't a slider. That was a fastball off the plate from a left-handed pitcher. It was an unconscionable strike call.
At no point was it anywhere near crossing the plate. And that's the biggest problem. So I'll ask you this, Khari, every year it's the human element, and we understand that. We really do. But at this point, does the league have to seriously consider a way to develop an electronic strike zone sooner rather than later?
I think that it's not. It's both the electronic strike zone, which I think look, I just think everybody would benefit from a little bit of standardization, right? Because some pitchers might be kind of upset, if they're used to getting a call off the plate or something like that, just by an inch or so, because I'm sure that there are going to be pitchers talking about how it feels like they're being forced to throw through a teacup, right? And hitters are going to be like, well, that's great because I know exactly kind of the defined zone or something like that. And so I think that would be an advantage for the hitters. At the same time, I know umpires probably, need a little bit of time to rev up in the beginning of the season as well. But I'm sorry, I've just seen some absolutely brutal strike calls so far this year. They've been horrible. And that's not good for the game either. When umpires are deciding key portions of the game or crucial at bats and getting and hitting a baseball is hard enough, and now you want guys to grow extendable arms to hit balls that are a foot off the plate or something like that. And then the other thing is, I think that you need to potentially expand replay to certain things. With the caveat that replay is already probably used too much as it is, which might be another reason why you would be looking at electronic umpires. But another thing that I saw with the Red Sox is this unbelievable foul ball call that took away a strikeout, where the guy swung and missed at a ball in the dirt, and he missed it by 4 inches. It wasn't even close. And the umpire blew the play dead. Alex Cora comes out and the umpire basically is just no way they're overturning that, because replay doesn't allow you to review foul tips. It'll review foul balls, whether they hit the chalk or not, but they will not review foul tips at home plate. And then the rest of the umpiring crew didn't see it well enough to say that this was clearly not a strike, when you could have just looked at the replay and seen he came nowhere near touching this baseball. And so the Red Sox got a strikeout taken away. Alex Cora gets ejected from the game. It didn't cost them the game at that point, but that was just I'm sorry, man. There's got to be a way to deal with this, because there are just absolutely horrendous calls being made around Major League Baseball right now. You had the play at the plate where somebody was just like, I'm still waiting for that guy's foot to touch home plate after the throw beat him by an entire day.
He didn't even go back and touch it. He just left. Like, how is that thing?
I don't know. It's been brutal.
If you're just joining the show, this is the Weekend Wake Up. I'm Vito. That's Khari. We're talking poor Major League Baseball umpires, and I just have to bring this one back. I'm going to hide us.
El día de hoy, iniciando juego, martes 17 de julio. Jonathan Jones, Cristian Delgado y Eric Aguilera, los primeros tres. Cuando aquí hay rápidamente una protesta por parte de Víctor Bojorquez en cuanto al conteo del umpire principal, Ulises Domínguez. Vamos a verlo y aquí vean ustedes cómo está protestando enérgicamente, y aquí en la repetición ven ustedes cómo hace el swing por completo y el umpire marcó bola.
It was a strike. I don't understand how you can miss that horribly, even if he didn't swing. The pitch was right down the middle.
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
I had forgotten about that. Honestly,
I will never forget
you're right.
that one.
That was like, that's iconic. Oh my God.
Let's move on. We're gonna move on before we close out the show here. Let's move on to the Bulls. So, the Bulls are struggling just in general. They're struggling to gel as a team. They went on a 3-game winning streak to start last week. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when it was like, they were on like this 6-game losing streak and they lost 8 of 10 or whatever it was, 8 of 9. And they went on a 3-game winning streak to start last week, and they kind of look like the new pieces were coming together. Since then, they have lost 5 straight, including, and this started with a terrible loss to Atlanta last Friday. Zach LaVine goes for 39 in the first half. And then the Bulls blow a huge lead in the second half and lose that game. They then lost a close game to Dallas and had 2 bad games against Memphis with another bad game against Orlando sandwiched in between. So, Khari, with 17 games left in the season, the Bulls are currently 5 games out of the 8th playoff spot, which is currently held by Charlotte, with 2 additional teams to jump over to even get there. Can Billy Donovan get the ship righted in enough time to make a run at the playoffs with the team as it's currently constructed? Or, similar to the Blackhawks, who we're not even going to get to today, are the Bulls better served getting like a higher draft pick and just not making the playoffs entirely?
Well, I think, so again, we have a situation where the Bulls could still make the playoffs if they, get the 10th seed. Right, because they'll have a chance to do the play-in tournament. And right now, they are a half game, I want to say, behind. Or they're a game back in the loss column of Toronto, which just took over the 10th spot. So they're still kind of hovering in that mix. At the same time, it's like the way I see it, it doesn't matter one way or another if they make the playoffs this year. They're not going anywhere. They don't have the talent. They don't play good enough defense, and they have games where Zach LaVine can go absolutely nuclear, and Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine have been playing well together. But again, it's just aside from that, what do you have? Right? They're not ready to make the playoffs. So to your point, sure, they could make the playoffs in theory, or they could make the play-in tournament at the least. I don't necessarily think they'll make the playoffs. They could, you never know. But I think that even if they make the play-in tournament, they're not going anywhere. So it would behoove them, honestly, to miss out entirely. Right. And I think it could happen if Zach LaVine has to miss any kind of extended time in the COVID protocol, because I don't know that we know yet, because I think he just got put on the COVID list. I don't know how much, if any, time he's going to miss, but if he has to miss games, they're not going to win. They will not win. I don't know that they can win one game without him, honestly.
Yeah, and Anthony mentions on Facebook, you know, asking, didn't we trade away the first pick? Yeah, they did. It's protected top 4, and the Bulls are not going to get, you know, but the key is if they get into the lottery, they have a shot to get into the top 4. Yeah. So, I mean, yes, their draft pick for all intents and purposes does not exist in the first round this year. But if they make the playoffs, it definitely doesn't exist. If they don't make the playoffs and they get a lower seed, they may, or they have a worse record. They still have a chance to keep that pick.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's about luck, right?
Right.
And so I think that you know, there really aren't that many paths forward that do a whole lot of good as far as the immediate future, because so what if they make the playoffs and they make everybody happy or it's like they make the play-in tournament and then somehow squeeze into the 8th seed. Everybody gets to feel better about it for, you know, this brief span of time. But again, it's just like the days in which the Bulls were clawing their way into the playoffs at the 7th or 8th seed. They get bounced, and then the next year they add the 24th pick in the draft, or right. something random like that, right? And they end up with some middling pick. It's usually around like 14 or 15.
That's exactly the point here, Kyrie.
And it's like, you know what those you know what those picks netted you? They gave you like Denzel Valentine.
Right.
Right. You don't need that. Right. And so, especially in next year's draft, yeah, you want a shot at one of those guys. Sure. Any shot you could possibly have, you want a shot at one of those guys. And I think the fact that you know, they weren't able to you know, do anything for Lauri Markkanen you know, at the trade deadline or something like that. I hope that they find something to do with him at the end of this year, because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it with him right now. He doesn't need to be here. The only 3 players, honestly, that need to be here when next year starts are Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and Patrick Williams. That's it. Everybody else is fair game for me. I think it's funny that Anthony asked the question, we got to be the worst sports town right now. It's funny because I've thought about that, right? With you know, because I feel like Chicago in a way is simultaneously starved for good teams, and yet hungry for enough mediocrity to sate them from meal to meal.
Yeah.
From season to season.
You're not wrong. I mean, it's funny that Anthony asked that, because
that's a rough place to be, man.
It's probably true. I mean, but everyone's in purgatory. Like, the Cubs are garbage. The only team that has any chance of being good is the White Sox. And it's, again, beginning of the season, but they're mediocre right now too. So the Bears are garbage. They're in shambles. The Bulls, again, do they want to fight for the 8th seed? Like, what's the point at that juncture? The Blackhawks, do they want to fight for the 4 seed in the Central? What's the point? You've got these young teams you're trying to build up and around. If they make the playoffs, okay, they get playoff experience. If they don't make the playoffs, you're probably better off because you get higher draft picks, or you get the opportunity for higher draft picks. But Anthony's question is hilarious because it's probably pretty true. Before we head out, on this day, happy birthday to my eldest, and so I say eldest in a different way than it would probably be used. My eldest but not older sister, Alexandra. So she is the oldest of my siblings, but she's still 5.5 years younger than me. She's turning 27 again, much like my mother has been for the past 25 years or so. We age differently over in this family. So, but also on this day in sports, okay, Sports Almanac, April 17th, 1860. This is the first World Championship boxing match. And I say World Championship because it took place between 25-year-old American John Heenan and 34-year-old Englishman Titch Sayers in an open field in southern England. It was a bare knuckle match, which was illegal at the time. But the key here is this bout lasted over 2 hours and went 42 rounds. And before the 43rd round could commence, these guys are still fighting. Now they're bloody and they're beat to hell because it's bare knuckle boxing and they went 42 rounds. But before the 43rd round could commence, the police arrived and everyone scattered, including the crowd and the boxers. So, Khari, I ask you this. 42 rounds of bare knuckle boxing. Is that one of the most insane things you've ever heard of?
I mean, did they survive? I guess I'm just kind of like, one of them had to die by the end.
So the funny thing is they both survived this fight. I guess Heenan was running away. The American was running away, but his eyes were so closed that he was pretty much legally blind. Like he could not see where he was running. And I think one of the little anecdotes at the side said that neither player outlived their neither boxer outlived their 30s. I mean, Heenan was only 25 at the time, so he lived into his 30s.
Yeah, and Titch was 34 at the time.
And Titch was 34 at the time. I don't know when he died, but he did not outlive. Neither one of them outlived their 30s. So
you want to talk about CTE, right? Like
CTE from one event.
From one event. Like that was probably enough. Like they probably had some straight up like encephalitis, like They invented crazy. Mad cow disease.
Yeah, no question. That's one of the most insane things. Like you see crazy things in sports and you hear about people doing crazy things. 42 rounds of bare knuckle boxing. Just I'm sorry, don't sign me up for that. I'm out.
No, it's bad enough watching it in like, what is that like? Snatch, right? Yeah, it's bad enough watching it in Snatch.
Which, by the way, I love that movie. Me too. That's an all-timer for me. I love
me too. At the same time, you're just watching dudes just get straight up like annihilated for however many rounds, and they were only going going down in the 5th. You did 5 rounds of this?
Right. I'm not making it to the 5th second. If someone throws a bare knuckle punch at me, look, I'm a lover, not a fighter. All right, But bare knuckle boxing, no, straight up, I'm out. I'm tapping out. There's a lot of times where I'm like, I can play that sport, not professionally, obviously, but I can play that sport. I can golf. I can shoot around, whatever. I'm not very good, but I can do it. Bare knuckle boxing, sorry, I'm not getting in that ring. This has been the Weekend Wake Up. I'm Vito. He's Khari. We thank everyone for watching on either Facebook or YouTube Live. Head over to YouTube Live, subscribe to the show page. Just look up my name, Vito Abinanti. Follow the show, subscribe, like, comment, do whatever you got to do. We try to reply to as many comments as we can, both during the show and after, if there are some that follow the show. But you can follow us every Saturday now. We have moved the show from Sundays to Saturdays. Sometimes Matt Moore joins us. Unfortunately, he had a family emergency this weekend, so we hope everything's well with Matt. But Saturdays from 10:30 Central until 11:30 or 12, just depending on how far we go. Excellent. I want to thank everyone for watching. Khari, thank you. Great show as always. We will talk to you everyone soon. Have a great weekend.